Jake Martinez pushed his cleaning cart down the long hallway of Omega-7 space station. The wheels squeaked softly as he moved past groups of aliens talking in their strange languages. Some had blue skin and forearms. Others looked like giant insects with glowing eyes. A few had tentacles instead of legs. Jake had seen them all before during his 3 years working here. The aliens barely looked at him. To them, he was just another human doing simple work. Humans were new to space travel compared to other species. Most aliens thought humans were not very smart. They let humans do cleaning jobs, fix broken things, and carry heavy boxes. Important decisions were made by aliens with bigger brains and longer histories among the stars. Jake did not mind being ignored. He liked the quiet work. Every morning, he arrived at 6 and started cleaning. He mopped floors in the diplomatic areas where alien leaders met. He emptied trash cans in the offices where trade deals were made. He fixed air filters and checked water systems throughout the massive station. The work kept him busy and gave him time to think. What the aliens did not know was that Jake Martinez used to be Colonel Jake Martinez. He had commanded human spaceships during the war near Centauri. That was a bloody conflict where humans fought against alien pirates trying to steal Earth colonies. Jake had been good at military strategy. Very good. He won battles that other commanders said were impossible to win. The Earth government had given Jake many medals. The Prime Minister had shaken his hand in front of news cameras. Military schools taught classes about his tactics. Young officers studied his battle plans and tried to copy his methods. For 5 years, Jake had been one of the most famous humans in space. But fame had a cost. Jake grew tired of the attention. He was sick of making life and death decisions. The weight of command had pressed down on him like a heavy blanket. After the war ended, Jake asked for permission to step down from his rank. His superiors were surprised, but they granted his request. Jake wanted to disappear. He wanted to find peace somewhere far from Earth and its politics. Omega-7 was perfect for this. The space station was neutral ground where all species could meet safely. It had thousands of workers from hundreds of worlds. One more human janitor would never be noticed. The station administrator who hired Jake never ran a background check. The name Jake Martinez was common enough that no one connected him to the famous colonel. Jake used fake papers that showed him as a simple maintenance worker from Earth. He rented a small room in the workers' quarters and began his new life. 3 years passed quietly. Jake learned the station like he once learned star charts. He knew every corridor, every service tunnel, every hidden passage. He understood how the air systems worked and where the power cables ran. He memorized the schedules of security guards and the habits of important aliens. But Jake could not turn off his military mind completely. As he cleaned, he watched and listened. He noticed things that others missed. He saw which alien groups were friendly and which ones avoided each other. He heard whispered conversations in languages he was learning to understand. He observed changes in behavior that might signal trouble. The current tensions worried him. For weeks, representatives from the Vex Imperium had been acting strangely. The Vex were a warlike species known for conquering other worlds. They had sharp teeth, red eyes, and always wore dark armor. Most aliens feared them, but the Galactic Council tried to keep peace through diplomacy. Jake had noticed Vex soldiers walking through areas they normally avoided. They studied security cameras and asked questions about station defenses. They carried themselves like troops preparing for battle, not diplomats working for peace. Their conversations stopped whenever other species came near. Yesterday, Jake had overheard 2 Vex talking near the waste disposal area. They spoke in their own language, but Jake had learned enough words to understand the basic meaning. They mentioned cleansing operations and removing human colonies. The words made Jake's stomach feel cold. Jake finished cleaning the main diplomatic hall and moved toward the residential areas. Here, aliens from dozens of worlds lived in quarters designed for their specific needs. Some rooms had high gravity for heavy world species. Others had special atmospheres for beings who breathed different gases. The variety still amazed Jake after 3 years. He passed a group of young Altarian officers talking excitedly about their first assignment to, Omega-7. Altarians looked almost human except for their blue-tinted skin and silver hair. They were known as excellent soldiers and engineers. One of them nodded politely to Jake as he pushed his cart past them. The simple gesture reminded Jake of his old life. Young human officers had once looked at him with respect and admiration. They had hung on his every word during briefings. Now he was invisible to everyone except when they needed their trash emptied or their floors cleaned. But invisibility had advantages. People said things around janitors that they would never say around important officials. Information flowed through Omega-7 like water through pipes, and Jake caught pieces of it every day. He had learned about trade deals before they were announced, romantic affairs between alien diplomats and secret meetings that shaped galactic policy. The Vex situation was different. This felt dangerous in a way that reminded Jake of the hours before major battles. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Something big was coming, and Jake suspected it would not be good for humanity. That evening, Jake returned to his small quarters and sat on his narrow bed. The room had basic furniture and a small window showing the stars outside. He kept no decorations or personal items that might reveal his past. The only unusual thing was a small communication device hidden behind a loose wall panel. Jake had not used the device in 2 years. It was connected to a secure Earth military channel that few people knew about. Activating it would mean breaking his cover and possibly ending his peaceful life on Omega-7. But if his suspicions about the Vex were correct, staying silent might mean watching innocent people die. He stared at the wall panel for a long time, weighing his options. Outside his window, the stars looked cold and distant. Somewhere among them, human colonies were going about their daily lives, unaware of the danger that might be coming their way. Jake made his decision. He opened the wall panel and pulled out the communication device. His fingers hesitated over the controls for just a moment. Then he began typing a message that would change everything. The next morning brought new worries to Omega-7. Jake noticed immediately that something had changed during the night. Vex security patrols had doubled in number. Their soldiers stood at corners where they had never been before. They watched other species with suspicious eyes and spoke in hushed voices through their communication devices. Jake pushed his cleaning cart through the diplomatic sector, moving slowly to avoid drawing attention. The Galactic Council chambers were busier than usual. Alien representatives hurried between meetings with worried expressions on their faces. The normal, relaxed atmosphere of the station had been replaced by nervous energy. He stopped to clean a trash bin near a conversation between 2 Centaurian diplomats. Centaurians were peaceful traders who rarely got involved in military conflicts. They looked like tall, thin humans with pale green skin and large eyes. Jake had always found them easy to work around because they treated service workers with respect. The Vex demands are unreasonable, one Centaurian was saying to the other. They want complete control over the Outer Rim territories. That would put human colonies under their authority. The Council is afraid to refuse them. The second Centaurian replied. The Vex have built up their military forces significantly over the past year. Intelligence reports suggest they have twice as many warships as they did during the last census. Jake continued cleaning while listening carefully. The Outer Rim territories contained some of humanity's newest colonies. Millions of humans had moved there to start new lives on fresh worlds. If the Vex took control, those people would be at the mercy of one of the galaxy's most aggressive species. After the Centaurians left, Jake moved to the security office area. He often cleaned here late in the evening when most staff had gone home. Tonight might be a good time to learn more about what the station's security chief was thinking about the current situation. The day passed slowly. Jake went through his normal routines, but his mind was focused on gathering information. He noticed that several alien species were avoiding areas where Vex representatives gathered. The usually crowded cafeteria had empty tables whenever Vex soldiers came in to eat. During his lunch break, Jake sat in a corner of the workers' dining area and watched the flow of people. Maintenance workers, kitchen staff, and cleaning crews from dozens of worlds shared the space. Most seemed unaware of the growing tensions. They talked about normal things like their families back home, upcoming leave time, and complaints about their supervisors. But Jake noticed a pattern. Workers who had assignments near Vex quarters looked nervous. Several had requested transfers to different areas of the station. When Jake asked casually about this, a human mechanic named Pete told him something interesting. The Vex have been bringing in a lot of equipment lately, Pete said while eating his sandwich. Boxes and containers that they won't let station security inspect. They claim it's diplomatic materials, but some of those boxes were pretty heavy. Took 4 workers to move each one. What kind of equipment needs 4 people to carry it? Jake asked. That's what I've been wondering, Pete replied. And why do diplomats need so much stuff? I've worked on this station for 5 years, and I've never seen any delegation bring in that much gear. After lunch, Jake found an excuse to visit the cargo bay area. His official reason was checking the waste disposal systems, but he really wanted to see what Pete had been talking about. The cargo bays were huge spaces where supply ships unloaded food, equipment, and other necessities for the station. Jake found Bay 7, where Pete said most of the Vex materials had been delivered. The area was now restricted, with Vex guards standing at the entrance. Jake could not get close enough to see inside, but he noticed something important. The guards were not regular Vex diplomats. These were soldiers with military-grade weapons and armor. Diplomatic missions did not usually need armed guards for their supplies. This was another piece of evidence that the Vex were planning something beyond normal negotiations. That evening, Jake volunteered to work extra hours cleaning the council chambers. Most staff went home after dinner, leaving the diplomatic areas almost empty. This gave Jake the opportunity he needed to gather more intelligence about Vex activities. He started in the main council hall, where important meetings took place during the day. The room was large enough to hold representatives from 50 different species. Each delegation had its own seating area designed for their specific physical needs. Some sections had low gravity fields for species from small worlds. Others had special atmosphere controls for beings who breathed different gases. Jake was mopping the floor near the Vex seating area when he heard voices coming from a small conference room nearby. The door was slightly open, and he could see the glow of lights inside. Moving quietly, he positioned his cart where he could listen while appearing to clean the hallway. 3 Vex officers were inside, speaking in their own language. Jake had been studying Vex speech patterns during his free time, using translation programs available to all station workers. He could understand perhaps half of what they were saying, but that was enough to make his blood run cold. "The cleansing operation will begin in 48 hours, one Vex was saying. "Our ships are already moving into position around the target systems. What about the Galactic Council?" asked another voice. "They will try to interfere. The Council will be too busy dealing with the situation here," the first voice replied. "Once we control this station, they will be cut off from their military forces. By the time they organize a response, the human colonies will be eliminated." Jake forced himself to keep cleaning while his mind raced. The Vex were not just planning to take control of territory. They were planning to destroy human colonies completely, and they intended to use Omega-7 as their base of operations. The conversation continued for several more minutes. Jake learned that the Vex had been smuggling weapons and soldiers onto the station for weeks. They had people placed in key positions throughout Omega-7's infrastructure. When they made their move, they would be able to take control of communications, life support, and security systems simultaneously. "The humans will never see it coming," one Vex said with what sounded like satisfaction. "They think their little colonies are protected by the Galactic Council's peacekeeping agreements. They have no idea how weak their defenses really are." Jake finished cleaning the hallway and moved away from the conference room. His hands were shaking slightly as he pushed his cart, but he forced himself to move at a normal pace. Running or showing panic would only draw attention he could not afford. Back in his quarters, Jake sat on his bed and stared at the hidden communication device. He now had concrete evidence that the Vex were planning an attack that would kill millions of innocent people. The Galactic Council either did not know about this or was choosing to ignore it. Either way, Earth needed to be warned immediately. Jake activated the device and began composing a message. He kept it brief and used code words that would make sense to military intelligence officers, but mean nothing to anyone who might intercept the transmission. "Storm approaching station. Major weather event planned for human settlements in Outer Rim. Require immediate consultation with Admiral Chang. Situation critical. Will provide detailed briefing upon arrival. Martinez." After sending the message, Jake destroyed all traces of the transmission and hid the device again. There was nothing more he could do until help arrived. But he knew that Admiral Lisa Chang would understand the urgency of his message. She had been his superior during the Centauri conflicts and was one of the few people who knew about his current assignment on Omega-7. Chang was also one of the smartest military officers Jake had ever known. If anyone could figure out how to stop the Vex plan, it would be her. Jake just hoped she could get to Omega-7 in time to make a difference. Outside his window, the stars looked the same as always. But Jake knew that somewhere in the darkness, Vex warships were moving toward human colonies. The peaceful life he had built on Omega-7 was about to end, and Colonel Jake Martinez would have to emerge from hiding once again. 2 days later, Jake watched through a viewing port as the UES Determination approached Omega-7. The ship was one of Earth's newest dreadnoughts, bristling with weapons and defensive systems. But it approached the station slowly and peacefully, broadcasting diplomatic identification codes that marked it as a trade mission rather than a military vessel. Jake felt a mixture of relief and anxiety as the great ship docked. Admiral Lisa Chang had responded to his message faster than he had dared hope. But her arrival also meant that his quiet life as a janitor was probably over. Once Chang learned the full extent of the Vex threat, there would be no going back to his peaceful routine. The Admiral disembarked with a small diplomatic team, following standard protocols for visiting officials. Jake watched from a distance as station administrators greeted the human delegation. Chang looked exactly as he remembered her from their last meeting 5 years ago. She was a small woman with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her calm demeanor hid a tactical mind that had earned respect throughout Earth's military forces. Jake had arranged to meet Chang in Maintenance Tunnel 7 Alpha, a seldom-used service corridor deep in the station's infrastructure. He knew the security patrol schedules well enough to pick a time when they would be alone for at least 30 minutes. Chang arrived precisely on time, accompanied only by her personal aide, a young lieutenant named Danny Cooper. Jake had worked with Cooper during the Centauri conflicts and trusted him completely. The lieutenant took position at the tunnel entrance to watch for unwanted visitors while Jake briefed the Admiral. "Still keeping busy, Colonel?" Chang asked with a slight smile. She had always called him by his military rank even after he officially resigned from active duty. "More than I would like, Admiral," Jake replied. "We have a serious problem." Jake spent the next 20 minutes explaining everything he had observed about Vex activities on the station. He described the increased security patrols, the mysterious equipment deliveries, and most importantly, the conversation he had overheard about cleansing operations against human colonies. Chang listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. When Jake finished, she was quiet for several minutes, obviously thinking through the implications of what she had heard. "How certain are you about the timeline?" she asked finally. "Based on what I heard, they plan to start the operation tomorrow night," Jake said. "They want to coordinate their attack with some kind of action here on the station." "That makes sense," Chang said grimly. "If they can control Omega-7, they can disrupt communications between the Galactic Council and military forces throughout this sector. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, it will be too late to organize an effective response." Lieutenant Cooper appeared at Jake's shoulder. "Admiral, we should wrap this up soon. I'm seeing increased Vex patrols in this area." Chang nodded. "Jake, I need you to maintain your cover and continue gathering intelligence. Can you get access to their equipment storage areas?" "Probably," Jake said. "I have master keys for most maintenance areas, and I know how to avoid the security cameras." "Good. I'll work through diplomatic channels to try to alert the Council, but I suspect they won't take action until it's too late. The Galactic Council has always been slow to respond to threats, especially ones that primarily affect human interests." Over the next 18 hours, Jake used every trick he had learned during his 3 years on the station. He mapped Vex positions throughout Omega-7, identified their key personnel, and discovered the locations where they had hidden weapons and equipment. The scope of their preparation was frightening. They had essentially created a secret army inside the station, ready to take control at a moment's notice. The weapons cache in Cargo Bay 7 was larger than Jake had imagined. Using his maintenance access, he was able to enter the bay during a shift change when the Vex guards were distracted. What he found inside made his military experience feel inadequate. The Vex had brought enough firepower to outfit a small army, including heavy weapons designed to destroy station infrastructure. Jake also discovered that the Vex had people placed in critical positions throughout the station. Several individuals he had assumed were normal diplomatic staff were actually trained soldiers. They had jobs that gave them access to life support controls, communication systems, and security networks. When the time came, they would be able to cripple the station's defenses from within. Meanwhile, Admiral Chang worked desperately to convince the Galactic Council that immediate action was necessary. But the alien politicians were more concerned with maintaining the appearance of peaceful negotiations than confronting an uncomfortable reality. They insisted that the Vex were simply conducting normal diplomatic activities, and that human concerns were exaggerated. The Council's response frustrated Chang, but it did not surprise her. She had dealt with galactic politics before and knew how slowly the system moved. Decisive action required unanimous agreement from dozens of species, with different interests and agendas. Even when facing a clear threat, the Council would probably spend days debating the proper response. By evening, it became clear that Earth would have to act alone. Chang called an emergency meeting with her senior officers aboard the Determination. Jake was smuggled aboard using a maintenance shuttle, allowing him to participate in planning sessions without compromising his cover. The situation was challenging from every angle. The Vex had superior numbers on the station and the advantage of surprise. They knew exactly when and how they planned to strike, while the human forces had to guess their enemies' timing and methods. Making matters worse, any open military action could trigger a larger galactic conflict that Earth was not prepared to fight. "We need to stop them without starting a war," Chang said during the planning session. "That means precision strikes against their key assets while minimizing collateral damage to station infrastructure and civilian populations." "What about the colonies?" asked Commander Ray Thompson, Chang's tactical officer. "Even if we stop the takeover here, their fleet is still moving toward the Outer Rim territories." "One crisis at a time," Chang replied. "If we can prevent them from taking control of Omega-7, we might be able to use the station's communication systems to warn the colonies and coordinate their defenses." Jake studied the tactical displays showing Vex positions throughout the station. His years of maintenance work had given him knowledge that even station security lacked. He knew secret passages, emergency systems, and structural weaknesses that could be turned into advantages. "I can get your people into position without being detected," he told Chang. "But once the shooting starts, my cover will be blown. There's no way to hide human military involvement in something this big." "I understand," Chang said. "Are you ready to become Colonel Martinez again?" Jake looked around the room at the familiar faces of military officers preparing for battle. He had missed this more than he cared to admit. The peaceful life of a janitor had been good for his mental health, but it had never fully satisfied his need to protect innocent people from harm. "Yes, Admiral," he said. "I'm ready." The final planning session lasted until late in the evening. Every detail had to be perfect because there would be no second chances. If the human forces failed to stop the Vex takeover, millions of colonists would die, and Earth's relationship with the galactic community would be permanently damaged. As Jake prepared to return to his quarters for what might be his last night as a janitor, Chang pulled him aside for a private conversation. "I want you to know that Earth never forgot what you did during the Centauri conflicts," she said. "Your tactical innovations saved thousands of lives and probably prevented a much larger war. The fact that you chose to serve quietly here shows the same dedication to protecting innocent people." "Thank you, Admiral," Jake replied. "I just hope we can stop this before it gets out of control." "We will," Chang said with confidence that Jake hoped was justified. "Tomorrow the galaxy will remember why humans should never be underestimated." The next day began like any other on Omega-7. Jake followed his normal morning routine, checking in with his supervisor and collecting his cleaning supplies. But hidden in his cart were military communication devices and defensive weapons that Admiral Chang had provided. Today, his years of careful observation would be put to the ultimate test. The Galactic Council Summit was scheduled to begin at noon. Representatives from 43 species had gathered to discuss trade agreements and territorial disputes. The meeting was supposed to last 3 days, bringing together some of the galaxy's most important political leaders in one location. Jake now understood that this gathering was exactly what the Vex had been waiting for. At exactly 11:30, Jake noticed the first signs that something was wrong. Vex personnel throughout the station began moving with unusual purpose. They walked faster than normal and spoke in quick, sharp sentences through their communication devices. Jake had seen this behavior before during military operations. It was the controlled tension that came just before combat. Jake activated his emergency beacon, sending a coded signal to Admiral Chang and her security team. The message was simple: storm beginning now. Then he continued pushing his cleaning cart through the diplomatic sector, maintaining his cover while watching for the next phase of the Vex operation. It came at exactly noon. As the summit meeting began in the main council chamber, Vex soldiers throughout the station dropped their disguises and revealed themselves as armed combatants. They moved in coordinated teams toward critical infrastructure points, communication centers, life support controls, security offices, and transportation hubs. Jake watched 2 Vex soldiers emerge from a maintenance closet near the council chambers. They wore light combat armor and carried energy weapons designed for close-quarters fighting. Their target was obviously the main communication array that controlled all station-wide announcements and emergency systems. But Jake knew something the Vex did not. The communication array had a backup control system located in Maintenance Tunnel 12, an area that appeared on no official station blueprints. Jake had discovered it during his first year working on Omega 7 and had never reported its existence to station administrators. Now that hidden knowledge would become a crucial advantage. Jake abandoned his cleaning cart and moved quickly through service corridors toward Tunnel 12. His years of maintenance work had taught him every shortcut and secret passage in the station. He could reach the backup communication controls before the Vex even realized they existed. As he moved through the tunnels, Jake heard the sounds of fighting breaking out throughout the station. Admiral Chang's security teams were engaging Vex soldiers in firefights that echoed through the metal corridors. Emergency alarms began sounding, but they were quickly cut off as the Vex gained control of the main communication systems. Jake reached the backup controls and immediately began sending emergency messages to human colonies in the outer rim. He warned them about the incoming Vex fleet and provided tactical information about enemy ship types and probable attack patterns. Even if the station fell, the colonies would at least have some warning about what was coming their way. But stopping the Vex takeover required more than sending warnings. Jake accessed the station's emergency systems and began implementing a plan he had developed during the previous night's strategy session. If he could not prevent the Vex from taking control, he could at least make that control as difficult and temporary as possible. Jake started by activating emergency bulkheads throughout the station. Heavy metal barriers dropped from the ceiling, sealing off entire sections and trapping Vex soldiers in areas where they could be isolated and defeated. The station's computer system protested the unauthorized commands, but Jake's maintenance access codes overrode most security protocols. Next, he began manipulating the environmental controls. Vex soldiers were adapted to hot, dry climates. Jake lowered the temperature in key areas and increased humidity to levels that would slow their movements and impair their combat effectiveness. It was a small advantage, but in a close fight, small advantages could determine the outcome. The most important part of Jake's plan involved the station's power grid. Omega 7 was powered by 3 fusion reactors located in heavily shielded sections near the station's core. The Vex would need to control these reactors to maintain their hold on the station. But Jake had spent months studying the power distribution systems and knew exactly how to create problems for anyone trying to seize control. Using his maintenance access, Jake began rerouting power flows throughout the station. He created artificial overloads that would trigger automatic safety shutdowns in critical systems. The Vex would find themselves dealing with constant equipment failures and power outages that would force them to spread their personnel thin trying to maintain basic station operations while Jake worked in the hidden maintenance tunnels. The battle for Omega 7 raged throughout the station's public areas. Admiral Chang had positioned human security teams at key defensive points, but the Vex had superior numbers and the advantage of having planned their attack carefully. The fighting was fierce and confused. Alien civilians ran for shelter while soldiers from multiple species tried to determine who was fighting whom. The station's security forces were overwhelmed by the sudden assault and struggled to coordinate an effective response. But Jake's sabotage efforts were having an effect. Vex commanders found their communication systems failing at critical moments. Lights went out in areas where they were trying to establish control points. Elevators stopped working, forcing soldiers to climb maintenance ladders between levels. Air circulation systems began producing strange noises that made it difficult to coordinate by voice commands. The tide of battle began to turn when Jake made his most desperate gambit. Realizing that the Vex commanders were coordinating their assault from the central communication hub, he decided to confront them directly. It was a dangerous plan that would expose him to enemy fire, but it might be the only way to disrupt their operation completely. Jake made his way through maintenance shafts toward the communication hub. The route took him past areas where human security teams were engaged in firefights with Vex soldiers. Through metal grating, he could see muzzle flashes and hear the distinctive whine of energy weapons. The communication hub was located in the station's upper section, surrounded by offices and conference rooms. Jake emerged from a maintenance shaft directly above the main control room and looked down through an access panel. 4 Vex officers were inside, coordinating the assault through communication links with their soldiers throughout the station. Jake had brought only basic maintenance tools and a single energy pistol that Admiral Chang had given him. Against 4 armed Vex soldiers, his chances were not good. But he had one crucial advantage: surprise. The Vex had no idea that anyone could access the communication hub from above. Jake carefully removed the access panel and dropped silently into the room behind the Vex officers. His military training took over, and he moved with the precision that had made him famous during the Centauri conflicts. The first Vex soldier went down before the others even realized they were under attack. The fight in the communication hub was brief, but intense. Jake used his knowledge of the room's layout to avoid enemy fire, while targeting the communication equipment that was essential to the Vex operation. When the shooting stopped, 3 Vex officers were dead and their command center was destroyed. With their coordination disrupted, the Vex assault began to collapse. Individual soldiers found themselves cut off from their commanders and facing determined human resistance. Admiral Chang's security teams pressed their advantage, retaking key areas of the station and forcing the remaining Vex forces to surrender. By evening, the battle for Omega-7 was over. The Vex takeover had failed, and their fleet approaching the Outer Rim colonies had been warned away by messages from the station. The immediate crisis was resolved, but Jake knew that the real consequences were just beginning. His cover as a simple janitor was completely blown. Everyone on the station now knew that the quiet maintenance worker was actually a military officer who had single-handedly disrupted an enemy operation. There was no going back to his peaceful life of mopping floors and emptying trash cans. As Jake emerged from the communication hub, he found Admiral Chang waiting for him with a squad of human security officers. She looked tired but satisfied with the day's outcome. "Outstanding work, Colonel," she said. "I think it's time for you to meet some people who have been very curious about Omega-7's most interesting janitor." The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 3 hours after the last Vex soldier surrendered. The Great Council chamber was filled with alien representatives who were still trying to understand what had happened on their supposedly secure station. Many species that had never paid attention to human activities were now demanding explanations about how a small group of humans had defeated a carefully planned Vex assault. Jake sat in a waiting area outside the chamber, still wearing his maintenance coveralls. Admiral Chang had offered to get him a proper military uniform, but Jake decided to face the council exactly as they had known him for 3 years. The symbolism felt important. These aliens needed to see that the person they had ignored was the same one who had saved their lives. Inside the chamber, Admiral Chang was presenting her official report to the assembled delegates. Jake could hear her voice through the chamber's audio system as she described the timeline of events leading up to the Vex assault. Her presentation was clear and factual, leaving no doubt about the severity of the threat that had been prevented. The Vex Imperium had positioned over 300 soldiers throughout this station, Chang was saying. They had weapons caches in 17 different locations and had compromised key personnel in critical infrastructure positions. If their assault had succeeded, they would have controlled all communications between Council forces and military installations throughout this sector. Jake listened as Chang described the human response to the crisis. She gave full credit to her security teams and emphasized the coordination required to defeat an enemy with superior numbers and preparation time. But Jake knew that the most important part of her presentation was still coming. The success of our defensive operation was made possible by intelligence gathering and tactical coordination. From a human operative who has been working on this station for 3 years, Chang continued. This individual identified the Vex threat, provided detailed information about enemy positions and capabilities, and personally disrupted their command structure during the critical phase of the assault. Murmurs of surprise rippled through the chamber. Most council members had assumed that Earth's intelligence capabilities were limited compared to older galactic civilizations. The idea that humans had been conducting covert operations on Omega-7 was clearly unexpected. "I would like to present this operative to the Council," Chang announced. "Colonel Jake Martinez, formerly of the United Earth Defense Force, currently assigned to special operations on Omega-7. Jake heard his name called and walked through the chamber doors. The sight that greeted him was both familiar and strange. He had cleaned these floors hundreds of times, but he had never stood in the center of the chamber while 43 alien species focused their attention on him. The silence was complete as Jake walked to the center of the room. Alien representatives who had never bothered to acknowledge his existence were now studying him with intense curiosity. Some looked surprised, others seemed embarrassed, and a few appeared genuinely impressed. Admiral Chang stood at the human delegation's speaking platform. "Members of the Council," she said formally, "I present Colonel Jake Martinez. His intelligence gathering and tactical expertise prevented a catastrophic assault that would have resulted in the deaths of thousands of station personnel and millions of colonists throughout the Outer Rim territories." The chamber remained quiet for several long moments. Jake could feel the weight of dozens of alien gazes as representatives tried to reconcile their memories of a quiet janitor with the reality of a decorated military officer. Then something unexpected happened. General Kethvar of the Altarian Defense Corps rose from his delegation's seating area. Kethvar was one of the most respected military leaders in the galaxy, a tall alien with blue-tinted skin and silver hair who had commanded successful campaigns against some of the galaxy's most dangerous threats. Jake had cleaned the floors around Kethvar's feet dozens of times during council sessions. The general had never spoken to him, never acknowledged his presence, never shown any sign that he considered Jake worth noticing. Like most aliens, Kethvar had simply accepted that humans were useful for manual labor but not much else. But now the general was walking across the chamber floor, his military bearing unmistakable even to alien eyes. He stopped directly in front of Jake and executed a perfect military salute. His voice carried clearly through the silent chamber. "Colonel Martinez," Kethvar said, "it is an honor to finally meet you properly, sir. Your reputation from the Centauri conflicts precedes you, and your actions here have proven that human tactical brilliance should never be underestimated." Jake returned the salute with the same military precision he had learned during his academy training decades ago. "Thank you, General," he replied. "Sometimes the best way to serve is from the shadows." The exchange seemed to break a spell that had fallen over the chamber. Other military representatives began standing and offering their own gestures of respect. Species that had considered humans primitive were forced to reassess their assumptions about human capabilities. Over the next hour, Jake answered questions from council members about the Vex threat and the defensive operation. His responses were professional and detailed, but he was careful not to reveal too much about human intelligence methods or military capabilities. Some secrets needed to remain secret, even after such a public revelation. The questions revealed how little most aliens had understood about the situation they had been facing. Many council members had assumed that the Vex demands for territorial concessions were simply aggressive negotiating tactics. They had not realized that a military assault was being prepared right under their noses. "How long have humans been conducting intelligence operations on this station?" asked Ambassador Veltar of the Rigelian Collective. Colonel Martinez's assignment to Omega-7 was part of Earth's general security arrangements, Admiral Chang replied diplomatically. "All council member species have the right to protect their interests through appropriate means." Jake appreciated Chang's careful phrasing. The truth was that his assignment to the station had been completely unofficial. Earth's government had known about his location, but had not ordered him to gather intelligence. His observations and analysis had been voluntary, driven by personal conviction rather than official duties. As the session continued, Jake began to understand the broader implications of what had happened. The successful defense of Omega-7 had demonstrated human military capabilities that most aliens had not suspected. Species that had dismissed humans as junior partners in galactic affairs would now have to reconsider their positions. But Jake also realized that his quiet life on the station was permanently over. Too many people now knew his true identity and capabilities. There was no way to return to the anonymity he had treasured for 3 years. When the formal session ended, Jake found himself surrounded by alien military officers and diplomatic officials who wanted to speak with him personally. General Kethvar invited him to visit Altarian military academies as a guest lecturer. Commander Zeftos of the Centaurian Defense Fleet offered him a position as a strategic advisor. Representatives from a dozen other species made similar proposals. Jake listened politely to all the offers, but his answer was the same to everyone. "Thank you for the honor," he said, "but I have found my place here on Omega-7, and I would prefer to continue serving in that capacity." The alien officials seemed puzzled by his response. They could not understand why someone with his abilities would choose to remain in such a humble position. But Jake had learned something important about himself during the crisis. He enjoyed the quiet work of maintaining and protecting the station. The difference was that now he could do it openly, with the respect and recognition of the people he served. Admiral Chang arranged for Jake to receive an official position as Omega-7's special security consultant. His duties would include continuing his maintenance work, while also serving as an advisor on station defense and emergency procedures. It was exactly the kind of job that Jake had not known he wanted. 3 weeks after the Vex assault, Jake was back to his normal routine of checking air filters and mopping floors. But now alien representatives nodded respectfully when they passed him in the corridors. Some even stopped to chat about station security or to ask his opinion about potential threats. The work was the same, but everything else had changed. Jake Martinez had found a way to serve that combined his love of quiet, useful work with his need to protect innocent people from harm. And throughout the galaxy, the story of the human janitor who had saved Omega-7 reminded everyone that the most dangerous person in any room might be the one you never bothered to notice. Jake was content. He had his peaceful work, the respect of his colleagues, and the knowledge that he was making a difference in the lives of beings throughout the galaxy. It was exactly the life he had been looking for, even if he had not realized it until now.